Hey, what's up? My name is Keith, and I'm the voice guy for this podcast. I was an alcoholic for many years, and one of the things that I read that stuck with me the most is this, and I never do this, but I wanted to share a quote that meant something to me, to you, and then we'll start the show. It's pretty short. You don't get over an addiction by stopping using. You recover by creating a new life where it's easier for you not to use. If you don't create a new life, then all the factors that brought you to your addiction will catch up with you again. That really hits home. This is Collateral Damage, addiction, recovery, and all the shit in between. We're going to talk about some heavy stuff. Your host is the daughter of an alcoholic mother and father. She's also the mother of an adult addict. As you'll hear in the show, she has seen it all. She has seen it all. And she has been through hell and back. Don't get it twisted, though. She's not right in the head, and she loves to have fun. So let's get real. Let's get raw. This is Collateral Damage, addiction, recovery, and all the shit in between. Now your host, Brandi Mack.
Welcome to Collateral Damage, Addiction Recovery, and all the shit in between. You guys met Keith, and the man behind my intro, which I am very pleased with. He put a little piece of himself into that intro, and I loved it, especially when I found out that he was in recovery. So thank you, Keith, for that. And I hope you guys laughed at that intro as much as I did when I first heard it. So many of you are here because you probably saw one of my TikTok videos and you came to hear the story of how we got our grandson. So last night when I got off work, because I've been working out of town, I recorded the podcast telling the entire story. And I didn't get to finish editing. It was going to be a 2-part series. And I don't think I'm ready to submit it to you guys. I want to sit on it. I want to think on it. I never want anything to come across as me bashing my daughter who suffers from substance use disorder. The reality is loving an addict, sometimes it's hard when you share your experiences to not make them look bad. Right? And I mean, many of us we look bad in some of our behaviors and whatnot. And that's never been what my TikTok was about, any of my social media. And my podcast definitely will not be about that. So I'm going to say I'm sorry if that's what you came for, but I'm going to give you something else, maybe a different side that you wouldn't expect to hear from me. When my daughter got pregnant, I was completely against it. She told me, and I immediately told her, I said, you have to terminate the pregnancy. You cannot have a child, because I think I knew in my heart that we would end up raising him. Now, I had hope. I had hope that maybe her having a child would fill a void that she had for so long, because my daughter really, all she's ever wanted was to feel loved and have a family. And she wanted that so much then. So my initial reaction was shitty. And I own that. And, my daughter's thrown that in my face several times, and she has every right to do that. However, she does know how much I adore my grandson. Throughout my daughter's pregnancy, she was sober and she was beautiful. She really was. I'm going to try not to cry during this. I have pictures of her, which I will never share. But I mean, she was just beautiful and she looked happy. You know, sometimes pictures can be deceiving, right? But I know that she was looking forward to having him. And I was fortunate enough that I got to be there for his birth, and she really wanted me to be there. And, you know, because I was living in Idaho, you guys, and she was in Florida, and I had to make that work with my schedule because, of course, her due date happened to fall over spring break. I ended up getting there a few days before she was going to be induced. And her and we went actually to St. Pete Beach and spent the day together. And I have beautiful pictures of her at the beach, getting ready to pop pregnant. And those I know are pictures that my grandson will cherish someday. I cherish them. She had struggled, you know, on and off using drugs recreationally, but she didn't really change until she became an IV drug user. So when she gave birth to my grandson, she ended up having to go for an emergent C-section. She just adored him. She really did. I mean, for her she was 19, I was able to be there for about a week before I had to head back and help her with him. And she just really took on that mom role. And I had a lot of hope. Like I never would have thought we would be dealing what we're dealing with now. I had no idea, because she wanted to do everything right by her son. Growing up, even though we had this really strained relationship, she was always kind of like a mama bear to her younger brother, who's 12 now. She absolutely adored him, just loved him and adored him. And she's very special. She really is. It just makes me sad because she's not the same person now that she was just a few years ago when she was pregnant. She wasn't perfect by any means, but who is? I'm definitely not. She had her son, and the reality is she was with somebody that didn't treat her very good. I was across the country. My mom helped out a lot, and we tried to help her with having a new baby and whatnot, but she was with somebody who really beat her down emotionally. And I think that significantly took a toll on her. Her and I have talked some about postpartum depression, if that's something that she had dealt with. She would have never admitted it to me then because she wanted me to think that everything was perfect. And I can relate to that. I was married to a man that treated me horrifically, and I was able to hide it from my family for 7 years because I didn't want them to know. And they didn't know how significant the abuse was until I told them I wanted a divorce, and I was done. So she didn't want me to see him in a negative light. I can see through bullshit, though. I mean, I just can. The first time I met him, I didn't trust him, and it was just that gut feeling. And I was right. She, many ways, walked the same path that I did, which I never wanted her to do. And sadly, you know, she was involved with somebody who was deep into addiction, and she fell into that trap. She was overly depressed, and at some point, she shot up with a needle, and the rest is history. I was living in Idaho. I would fly down every 3 months was the norm for that first year after my grandson was born, you know, because I wanted to see him. I missed him. I hated being across the country, and I wanted to see her. She ended up flying out. I went down, and then she ended up flying out because I had to have surgery, and she brought my grandson, and we had such a great visit, and I didn't want her to leave. I knew she was not happy, but I also understood there was nothing I could do to get her to stay. She kind of had to figure that out on her own. And I didn't openly talk shit about the guy because all that was going to do was potentially push her away even more. You know, domestic violence is just a really, really shitty situation to be in, because if somebody isn't ready to leave, there's really nothing you can say that's going to convince them to leave. And all they'll end up doing is cutting you off because they don't want to hear it. I think it kind of aligns with addiction in many ways, right? Because if somebody doesn't want to be sober, they're not going to be sober. All she wanted was to have a family and was very well taken care of. He was so clean all the time. She changed all the diapers. She fed him. October, I had come down to visit, and there was a change in her mood that I had noticed. And she was just very, very irritable and moody. And I felt like she was kind of picking fights with me. And I was concerned. And at one point I just said, you know what, I'm not going to be treated like this. I'm going to go to the hotel near the airport. I love you, but I'm not going to, stick around and be treated like dog shit. And that's what I did. My mom had gone with me and stayed with me at the hotel on the beach until I was able to get my flight and go home. That December, right after Christmas, that I found out about the drug use. And I just wish I knew how she was feeling when she gave in that first time. I lost my daughter then. I have seen pieces of her through her sobriety, but she's not been the same ever since she became an IV drug user. And I know it's so easy, right, to be angry, and there are times when I am angry. And it's not that I'm even angry at her. I'm angry at this fucking addiction, at these drugs that are taking so many loved ones away from us. When you have to accept the fact that there is nothing that we can do, we can't save them. When somebody gets a disease or they get sick and they reach a point, many times they want treatment, but they're still usually themselves. You lose that person. These drugs make these individuals do things that they would never do. They never would have done before. They sell themselves. They get sex trafficked. They commit crimes. I mean, I've heard stories of people getting their house robbed by their adult child for drugs, for drug money. And everybody always says, they're like, don't lose hope, hold on to hope. It's getting hard to hold on to hope. I honestly feel in my gut at times that she will die from this disease. Do you know how hard it is to feel that way? If you don't love somebody who is an addict, you don't know. You can think about it, but you really don't know. When they say mourning the living, that is so fucking true. It is. You are mourning the living. Sleepless nights, phone anxiety. Many of you, I haven't talked about this actually on the podcast, but let's talk phone anxiety. How many of you, maybe your child is sober, maybe they've been in a relapse, anytime your phone rings, how anxious you get, especially if it's a number you don't recognize? Every time for me. And I call it phone anxiety. I can't stand it. It never ends. And God forbid a number call me, at night. I really get anxious. I dread answering the phone many times. And many times I don't answer the phone if I do not know the number. Phone anxiety is real, you guys. It is. And it sucks. And I've messaged with family members who have told me when I've talked about phone anxiety, they said their loved one had been sober like 7 years and they still get phone anxiety with it. Because during that time, they've probably gone through like what we have, multiple relapses, and there's so much anxiety that comes with that. I don't know if anybody else can relate, but something I have found, and it's sad, it really is that I have more anxiety when she's sober than I do when she's in active addiction. Because I think I've reached a point where I have come to terms with the fact that she's in a relapse. And I try not to think about the things that could potentially be happening when she is out, living that lifestyle. But when she's sober, she gets sober or she enters treatment, I have this constant anxiety, it seems, of when's the ball going to drop? When's she going to leave? When is she going to relapse? How long do we have? perfect example of this. And I had made a TikTok video of this. It was a couple years ago. My daughter had been sober 8 months, and I had scheduled family pictures. We had not had family pictures done in a few years. And so I wanted, since my grandson was, born, I wanted all of us to get family pictures together. I scheduled it. We were all dressed up. The weather was beautiful, you guys. And as we're driving to go meet, we were going to get them done at the beach. God decided, let's just dump as much rain as we can. And it was a monsoon. The photographer calls me and she's like, I do not think this is going to clear up. I think we're going to have to cancel. And I just started crying. I was so upset because this was in October, and at the end of October, we're going in the holiday season. As many of you know, like November, early December, that is a very busy time for photographers, right? Because everybody wants to get their Christmas pictures done. So they're usually booked out. And I knew this was going to be an issue. I'm thinking she's going to end up having to schedule this way out. And immediately in my head, I was crying, and I was thinking, I was like, I'm not ever going to get these pictures. It's just not going to happen. I was right. I didn't ever get those pictures. And I actually told the photographer that. I was just telling her, I said, you don't understand. And I'm sure she thought I was crazy. I said, I was like, I never know if my daughter's going to relapse. And I'm just desperate to get these done. And of course, she was booked out, and she ended up refunding us. And I was just crying in that TikTok video because you never know if that's the last time. So those pictures didn't get done because she ended up relapsing not long after that. I had rented a condo in Destin for spring break for the kids after that. And I ended up scheduling family photos knowing she would not be there. And that was probably one of the hardest things I had ever done. And those pictures were absolutely gorgeous. My grandson, the kids were just so great when those were done. And they were done on the beach in Destin. And they're probably my favorite family pics that I had ever had done. But my heart was breaking the entire time because a piece of our family was missing. And still every time, because I have those pictures all over my house, my heart aches because my daughter is not present in those. She's made a lot of mistakes, she has. But the Brooke I know, she's not a bad person. She isn't. She's a very smart person, just making some really dumb choices. I hate for her that she has missed all these years with her son because she will not get those memories. She missed out on them. And I should be angry at her for that, but I'm actually sad for her because this was not what she wanted. And I know, addiction is a choice. That's what a lot of people want to throw around. So the thing is, I do believe that addiction is a disease. And I'm going to tell you why. I believe it's a disease because what starts out as a choice, right? Recreational use, you have a weak moment. You're not thinking you're going to throw away your entire life to live on the streets, to lose your children, to barely, have money to eat. Nobody picks that life. That doesn't happen right away. It takes time, right? Because those drugs take over. And what essentially what they do is they mess with your dopamine and, your chemicals, and you develop a chemical imbalance in your brain. So when you come off of those drugs, your dopamine completely depletes. And you go into a horrific depression. And then let's not even talk about the withdrawal that's involved depending on what you're coming off of. Opioids cause a huge amount of withdrawal. Alcohol is probably the worst, and alcohol is legal. It becomes a disease because it alters the chemistry in your brain. All right. And I just want some of you who maybe struggle with choice versus disease. It's a little bit of both. We've all made a poor decision during a weak moment. But, making that decision hopefully isn't going to cause us to throw away our life in our family. Sadly, drugs do have that impact. And this country has a huge epidemic on their hands. And I don't know if there's anything that can ever be done about it. You know, all these pharmaceutical companies, they're coming out with new drugs to try to block the high. It's not a solution. But if it saves lives, I'm for it. If somebody has to take a drug to get their life back, oh fucking well. And I didn't always feel that way. I felt like you were replacing one drug with another. I did. And it was people on TikTok who really changed my view on this, because I got to see videos of people who were in recovery talking openly on the platform about how Suboxone or Methadone gave them their life back. They got their children back. They have a career. And I've had a lot of people message me privately because they're healthcare workers, that they would not want people knowing that they were an addict or that they were on Suboxone. But they've messaged me and told me how that's how they got their life back. And there is no shame in that. I want anybody listening to this, if you're in recovery and you are on any medicated assisted treatment, do not feel guilty for making the decision. You made the decision to not use your drug of choice. You made the decision to try to get your life back. And that's how you have to look at this. Yeah, it sucks, right? Nobody wants to be dependent on a medication. It's a pain in the ass. You have different side effects that come with it. Nobody wants to be dependent. But I'm telling you, families, if your loved one has tried abstinence numerous times and continues to fail, educate yourself on medicated assisted treatment and the different options that are out there. This is something I will be educating all of you on. It's on my list of podcasts I'm going to do. And I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the interviews, because I have a questionnaire that I send out to the people who I'm potentially going to interview, because I really want to get more into depth in their story and hear their views on it. And I have no problem with people coming on my podcast that disagree with my views. I am in talks with somebody in the harm reduction community. They've agreed to come on. I just got to send them the questionnaire, and I really hope it's going to play out, because she has so much valuable information that I don't even know about. I watch some of her videos, and she genuinely gets out in the community and she tries to educate, and she's always been very kind and respectful. And I think she can bring a lot of great information to families out there, because I look at it like this. Sometimes, these addictions of our children, especially, it can consume us, right? And for me, I wanted to try to help others. Like, that was something that really kind of impacted me when I started sharing, was interacting with so many people in recovery that I wanted to try to give back in some ways. We don't really have any harm reduction in my county where I live. And so that's something I want to talk about with this TikToker, is maybe how I can get that brought into my county, because my county's pretty rural. They just now, finally, I think they're offering Suboxone in the area. It's just all they have. It's all 12-step based programs. And we have a huge meth problem. And it's just really, really sad. I think, though, let's face it, regardless of how rural my county is, the drug problem is everywhere. There's no place in this country that is not touched by drugs in some way. But I want to educate you guys and educate myself more on harm reduction. And, this can give family members the opportunity maybe to get out in the community and advocate for that, especially if you have lost a loved one to addiction. That's a lot of times what I will get messages is that's how they give back. They jump out into the community to help others because they don't want to see another parent lose a child like they did. Many people have an issue with me talking about this, and there's a significant gray area, right? It's talking about my daughter's addiction in some ways, and believe it or not, I leave so much out, so much detail out. I really am very vague. If I really wanted to be juicy and get views, trust me, I have so many stories I could share, But this isn't a bashing podcast about my daughter. If anything, what I am hoping by speaking and sharing my story of what it's like loving somebody who has substance use disorder is to help end the stigma that is surrounding drug use. I'm hoping that I can develop something to provide some type of course to help educate healthcare workers that we could get across this country. And it's not something I'm going to be able to do alone, right? But we need to be educating our healthcare workers on this. And they need to hear from family members on what this is like. And they need to find their empathy again. But, one of the hardest things is having a patient that overdose. They end up on a ventilator. You hope that's their rock bottom, right? And then you get them off the breathing machine. And the first thing they want to do is leave AMA, which is against medical advice, because they're detoxing. They want to use because those drugs consume them. And particularly with opioids, many times when they're that far gone, they just want to feel normal. They get sick and they can't feel normal unless they have those drugs in their system, because their body has just become completely dependent on it. Many times they're not even getting high. They're just trying to survive. But those drugs, the difference is those drugs are just talking to them, convincing them that they have to do whatever it takes to get that drug. And it consumes their lives. I don't think people view alcoholics in the same negative light that they view illicit drug users. They should be viewed the same. An addiction is an addiction, no matter how you look at it. And the worst patients I have cared for, the worst suffering I have seen, has been liver failure patients from alcohol abuse. That is a very slow, miserable death. And I have seen recently, I have lost several patients younger than 40 to liver failure. Families that have to watch them suffer, that's something you never forget. My grandson is loved. My grandson is happy. I wouldn't have my grandson if my daughter had not given birth to him. And she didn't have a child then because she wanted to not take care of him and give it up. She wanted to be the best mom that she could be. But drugs ripped that away from her. I've thought a lot about what I'm going to tell my grandson as he gets older. He will always know that his mother loved him. I hope he'll believe it. That his parents did not pick drugs over him. That he is enough. But we do not talk negatively about his mother. Or even his dad. We don't do it in front of him, especially. Even all the shit I went through with my ex-husband, as much as I hated that man, I really made every effort to not talk bad about him in front of my daughters. I really did. Sometimes it was hard, and I had a nickname for him. You guys want to hear what the nickname was? It was Brown Round, because I frequently wanted to call him asshole, but I named him Brown Round, so I wasn't cussing around the kids. Hard to believe, right? With my foul mouth. So that was always his nickname in my phone, and my mom always just laughed at me calling him that. But just try, just be mindful of the things you say, because kids hear everything. Will be. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Take care.
All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to leave you with a little bit of an assignment. One, I think journaling is a fantastic thing. So if you're not journaling already, I encourage you to do it. Put all of your thoughts on paper. It is a great release. And sometimes we just need to say, on paper what we might not be able to say out loud. And it's not for anybody to read. You don't ever have to go back and reflect on it, but I think journaling is a great outlet if you're up for it. At least try it and give it a shot. Another assignment I would like to give you, I would like each of you family members who are listening, if you have never been to an AA, NA, Smart Recovery meeting, go online or go in person, however you choose, but online is an easy way, and find one. I'm going to put the link in the notes for this podcast for both Smart Recovery and AA, and go find a group and listen to it. They're usually about an hour long, sometimes a little longer, and just listen. You don't have to interact at all. Rarely do they ask you to show your face. It would be very brief. Otherwise, I mute and have my screen black the entire time, and I just listen. I encourage you to do that because I think it's important to have a better understanding of maybe what goes on in these meetings. 12 steps do not work for everyone. So this isn't really about what program is right for anyone, but I think if you've never gone to a 12-step meeting, I think it's something all family members should experience because majority of the rehab programs throughout the world are 12-step based. So those are my assignments, and I will try to have an assignment for you each week. Take care. Okay, so we've made it through another podcast episode, and if you like what you're listening to, how would you like to join my email list? What that's going to do is I'm going to start writing a newsletter. It's going to allow you to receive some of the more up-to-date information on addiction. I'm going to be putting reviews that people leave about the podcast on these newsletters. And it's also going to keep you informed on when new episodes release and upcoming people who will be getting interviewed. I'm currently lining those up. And so the link is going to be at the bottom at the notes section of the podcast. And I hope you'll join. I'm not going to be spamming you with tons of emails, but you're able to unsubscribe anytime. And it's been good. Take care.